Hi, everyone. Thank you, Scott. Nice to be here with you today. I'm sorry for those of you who expected to see Matt and see me. Hopefully, I'll be able to offer some content today that will be useful and helpful. I always say these are so much more interesting if you will put in your questions and ask questions other than to just listen to me talk. I don't even like to listen to me talk. Like Scott said, I work pretty closely with Dr. Rob. I was kind of an early adopter of Prodependence, so to speak. I heard Dr. Rob do his dissertation work on it, and it was so inspiring and exciting to hear a new treatment paradigm for family members and couples. So if you have any questions, I think sometimes it's hard to know the difference. You know, we're prodependence is very different than the codependent models, that the early models that have really been the most prevalent in the recovery world and in the therapy world for families. So if you have a question like what's the difference, and I can try to answer that, please type them in. As far as content today, I was thinking, since I am filling in for Matt, and his is really about prodependence for couples, I was thinking about working with couples, some of the work that I do with couples, and um, what are some of the issues that couples face that might be something that those of you watching might be facing. Um, One thing that I noticed that comes up quite a bit is one of the things you'll hear therapists say a lot is, well, what do you need in the relationship? What are you needing to feel safe? What are you needing to be able to have this conversation? What do you need from your partner in order for you to feel more connected? So we use this word need quite a bit. I remember the first time someone asked me what I need, they might as well have talked to me in Russian. I had no idea. I never really considered what I needed before. So it took some time and some of my own work to figure out what are my own personal needs. So today I want to talk about needs inside of a relationship for a minute. And if you guys have questions again about this, or need some clarification, just type it in. And I was thinking about the difference between needs and wants. I think that's something that is very frequently crossed in relationships. I will hear people say things like, well, I need that, and if you can't give that, then I'm out of here, or whatever. And that might be true, but more often than not, some of those are just, I'm so frustrated with you, or I'm so frustrated with the situation. It's not really a need, it's more of a want. So some of the things I have couples do is really try and separate what are actual needs. And by needs, I mean non-negotiables. Needs mean I have to have this particular thing in order to feel safe in the relationship, to even be in the relationship at all. They're not ultimatums, they're not that, they are just what I need in order to be in the relationship. And then there are wants. Wants are more negotiable. They are things that enhance the relationship, that help me feel better, help me feel more secure, but they're not necessarily deal breakers if they don't happen. And some couples usually look at me really like confused, like, oh no, I don't know the difference. Those are really, it feels really muddy in there. So I will often say, if you think about needs from the sense of personal needs, we all have basic human needs. You know, we need shelter and food and water and love and certain amounts of touch and nurturing. And those are needs that we have to have in order to survive. Things that we might want, I might want a better paying job. I might want to be able to hang out with my friends 3 or 4 days a week. I may want certain things that might or might not happen, but they won't break me if they don't necessarily. But they are things that would be important. So I'm not trying to minimize wants, but they are something that's where we usually have space to kind of work a little bit. In relationships that have addiction, needs often go overlooked, highly overlooked, meaning my own personal needs, oftentimes out of love and out of desire to help. Sometimes partners get very lost in their own needs. They start to wonder, like they start forgetting to take care of their own basic needs because their life's in crisis. They also, there's so much drama and crisis in the relationship, sometimes they don't even think about needs, what their needs are. They're just trying to hold the house together, so to speak. And some basic needs that they may have in the relationship go unmanaged and not taken care of. And then for an addict, if addicts knew what their needs were and were meeting them appropriately, they wouldn't be in addiction. So this is a really big piece for somebody who's struggling with compulsive or addictive behavior, is recognizing I've got needs. This is not about sex. This is not about alcohol. This is not about drugs. This is unmet needs. These are things that aren't getting taken care of on my part. So those are individual needs, and then the relationship has needs. So what does a relationship need to survive? What does your relationship need to survive? And what kind of wants do I need to meet inside of that relationship to make it flourish and grow and to nurture that relationship? So it's something to think about, and I'll often have couples kind of sit down alone without input from the other and write down, what are my needs? And sometimes you can only come up with a couple at first, and that's okay. Like for instance, if I'm a couple that's dealing with infidelity, I might need, in order to be in this relationship, complete transparency with time, with communication, maybe maybe money. I need complete transparency. I need fidelity. I need you to be true, to your commitments. And the relationship might need accountability, accounting for certain things. The relationship might need I'm just drawing a blank, but I'll come back to it. So needs that the relationship has to survive. Wants, maybe we need a date night every week. Maybe I need more verbal affirmation that you still care and that you still want to, that you still care about me. And maybe I also need, maybe I also want more time as a family, or together or something. So we have to decide what's a need and what's a want, what's negotiable and what's not. So those are some thoughts I had. I've had some experience with that the last couple of weeks, and they're not easy. I want to acknowledge that. And some things feel like both. They feel like a need and a want, and they sort of straddle the line. So I call those straddlers. So I'll just have to bring your straddlers, the ones that you're uncertain about, and let's really talk about them. Sometimes it helps to have a therapist. Well, oftentimes it will help to have a good couples therapist help you navigate those. So when you're saying, this doesn't happen, then I'm out of here, let's make sure that's a need and not a want, and that I'm saying those things productively, that I'm trying to, heal the relationship with, and I'm clear in myself what I need and what I want. And the person struggling with the addiction will have needs and wants. They'll need to figure out inside the relationship. I need safety when I disclose that I haven't been perfect that day, or that I had a slip up. I don't want verbal abuse or physical violence. I understand that you're going to be upset, but if it's going to go there, then I need safety, and maybe we need to come back at some time when we can talk, in a different way. So everybody has the right to their own needs and wants, and they have the right to their own needs and wants inside the relationship. And they may be different for each person. So stuff that's been on my mind.
Thank you, Kim. I'm so glad I love the term straddlers. I mean, I always scribble notes, and I was like, gray area, question mark. And you hit it with straddlers. I was like, some of this stuff, I mean, I don't know what if it's a need or a want, or maybe it's both, or maybe it's not quite either, or, so that is common. You see
Yes.
that a lot.
Very much. People, sometimes it just feels like both. It feels like this is a need, and sometimes it might be. But what I find is sometimes people put pressure on wants. They call wants needs. And sometimes it's not that you can't live without them, you don't want to. It's uncomfortable. It's not where you want to be, but we want to be really careful inside the relationship that sometimes it just gets really heavy and dramatic because I'm trying to make sense out of things that don't make sense. So I might say it's a need when it's really a want. So your therapist and your support system, your community, whoever supports you can be really helpful. Like, is this something that I absolutely have to have right now, right this minute in the relationship? Or maybe this can go on hold for a minute while he or she is healing and recovering, and maybe we'll keep revisiting this conversation. Sometimes things move from wants to needs. Sometimes things move from needs to wants. So I just think it's a worthy conversation. If not, everything becomes like dramatic, and this, it's the end of the world if this doesn't happen, and then it becomes a little bit like a crying wolf. You know, we kind of wear that out. And I really think relationships need to be really looked at, and we really have to really dig deep to figure out, you know, and if you don't know, that's okay too. I want to say that sometimes when we're in crisis, our brain isn't working enough to know what we need or want. So like I said, people in your support system and good sound therapists that have training will be able to help you sort through that and at least get started. So if you're, it might be a good exercise to sit down, draw a line down the middle of a paper, put needs on one side, wants on the other, maybe put a little column in the middle for our straddlers or our gray area, and start kind of figuring out what do I need and which ones are getting met and which ones are not. If I have needs that are going unmet, then there's a lot of pressure on the backbone of that relationship. And relationships typically can't last, it can only last so long. Every relationship's different with needs going unmet.
So you mentioned a lot of people will take a want and sort of escalate it to need, even though it's really a want. Do you see the opposite of that too, particularly with betrayed partners? Well, it's really a need, but I'm going to pretend it's a want because out of fear or whatever.
Absolutely. And sometimes they do that on purpose. Sometimes they're like, look, I realize that he or she isn't in a position to meet that need right now, but I'm willing to be patient while they work on it. And sometimes it's that I minimize my needs because maybe I'm not ready to make a decision about the relationship. Maybe I'm afraid to state what those needs are, or I'm afraid that if I state them, they won't get met. There's lots of reasons why we do that, but ultimately we have to know our needs and wants in order to even establish like healthy boundaries within that relationship. Because what am I protecting? What am I, like, what's the point? Why do I need to say yes or no? Or, you know, so these are all very personal. And I find that as I work my needs and wants, both individually and in relation to people that I love, I have to be really thoughtful about that. Like, you know, I didn't realize this was a need, but it really is, because I find myself avoiding the relationship if this isn't present. And I just can't be in the relationship. I can't sustain that relationship if certain elements aren't in place.
Okay, cool. We've got some questions here, so we better get to them. First one, I'm a male porn addict, 8 months into recovery, 241 days sober. Congratulations. I'm moving past denial and shame. However, my wife of 18 years believes my addiction includes affairs because of my emotional and behavioral changes when deep in my addiction.
Okay. So I would assume this is more of a discussion piece than a question. Maybe the question would be something like, how do I help my wife feel safe and reassure her if I'm not engaged in extramarital or extra relational affairs? There's lots of ways to do that. I think it's more with behavior than anything. You know, if I've been in cycles where I've been dishonest and I've been lying for large periods of time, then it will have to look different. It doesn't matter as much what you say, it matters what you do and how you show up in the relationship. Are you transparent? Are you open? Are you accountable? How do you react when you get accused of having affairs? You know, are you defensive? Those are always red flags. Defensiveness is the biggest red flag ever in relationships when these things are happening. You can always take a polygraph. I'm a big polygraph believer. I've said that on many of these webinars. I didn't used to be. I don't know why. I think it's just years and years of working, but I think it's a great tool. So that might be something, if you have not done a full disclosure, also with a therapist, with therapists that are trained to do that, that might also help clear up the history. Sounds like she's still doubting and wondering, do I know everything? Because she's uncertain. And so a full disclosure with a follow-up polygraph could be a wonderful tool. If we have nothing to hide, we hide nothing, right? So.
Yeah, I just want to add, you know, there's a reason your behavior is different when you're active in your porn addiction. It's because you're shutting off your primary relationship with your wife, and which she's not feeling intimately connected with you, because in your addiction you're more connected with and more worried about porn than she is. And I'm not generalizing here. This is what porn addiction looks like, and this is what sex addiction looks like. And you are cheating. Porn is cheating. It's cheating. If your wife isn't happy about it, it's cheating. If you and your wife together agree that yes, porn is okay, then it's not cheating, but it's probably still going to have an impact on your relationship, and not a good one. I mean, I don't want to get too deep into that, but it's easy for her to make up stories in her head about why you're not connected with her. And it's easy to say, well, he's admitted to porn, what else is there? So yeah, I wholly and heartily recommend full disclosure, therapist facilitated full disclosure. Do not do it without the help of a therapist.
I agree.
Yeah, and it's good for your recovery to have that accountability, and it's good for her process of healing to know that she has the whole truth.
Well, and I want to say one more thing too. Congratulations on 8 months of sobriety. That's awesome. And that's such a great start. Remember, there's probably a lot more time though that you haven't been sober, that you've been in the relationship. So, there's a lot of grief, there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of fear that she'll go through wondering, she's trying to figure out where to put her feet of trust, where to plant her feet with trust. So patience with that process is also really important. If you haven't engaged in affairs or not engaging in affairs, then you have nothing to feel defensive about. I would definitely ask her. It sounds like you feel very afraid right now and uncertain, which I could understand why. What is it that you need from me right now? There's that need word again. What is it that I can do, or what do you need from me right now to feel safe? Is there anything I can do? Without defensiveness will go a long way to continue that healing journey for her, to help her on that journey.
So I see now there's actually some follow-up to this. This individual says her need is to have the truth. She wants disclosure, but she wants it in a casual setting without our therapists, who are both CSATs. I have repeatedly offered full therapeutic disclosure with polygraph to help her, but she only wants it in a casual setting with no polygraph. Since she's not accepting my offer, are there any options to help her with her need for the truth? I really want to help her heal. Is this a kind of a normal response for a betrayed partner to want disclosure but not therapeutic?
This is the first time I've probably ever heard this particular thing. I'm not saying it's wrong or bad or anything. I just, normally what I've experienced, at least in my experience, partners they do want the safety of the therapist and the help there. They're often very impatient with that process because it sometimes takes longer than what is comfortable, for an addict to get clear about the history and to have the desire and ability to be completely transparent about that. You can certainly talk to each other. I mean, there's nothing prohibiting you from giving it to her. The problem I see is it can escalate very quickly and become very unsafe for both people. That's why I would be curious, maybe she doesn't have a connection with her therapist or the therapist you're working with. Maybe you haven't worked with them long. I don't know. I'm just thinking of possibilities, but you certainly have every ability to tell the truth. outside of the therapeutic setting, I like Scott wouldn't recommend it, but you certainly could. And if she still feels like she doesn't have the whole truth, then obviously there will need to be more follow-up there. And in my experience, that's frequently the case. And it might not be in her experience. That might be okay for her. But I'm a therapist, so I'm always going to recommend safety with the therapy. But
is this a situation where perhaps the husband should proceed as if he's doing a therapeutic disclosure and do all of the work that leads up to that and prepare all the documents and even put the polygraph in place, and then say, I'd really like to do this with therapists, but if not, I'll give you my disclosure and I'm going to go take a polygraph anyway, and I'm going to bring you the results. I mean, I don't know.
I would do that. I would prepare exactly the way you would prepare with your therapist. You could schedule the polygraph and have obviously the polygraph will go to the therapist, not to the client, but the therapist. And that way, if she ever changes her mind, and you could give her that disclosure too, without having to be in therapy. I mean, again, no therapist is going to control all of that. That's up to you guys. And if she wants that follow-up, the confirmation of the polygraph, it would be available to her. That's absolutely an option.
Yeah, and the reason to have a therapist is tremendous feelings come up, and you can end up in a huge fight that could end your relationship when what you're really trying to do is save it, without that person to mediate. And
right, the therapist provides this this non-biased middle ground, and so they can help kind of bring all the emotions down, help ground, can help support, can help just facilitate that, and help manage all that intensity, because if there's been a long period of acting out behavior, it's going to feel very it can be very overwhelming to hear all in one place. For both, not just for the partner receiving it, but for the addict too. That's a lot of, there's a lot of vulnerability in that, and a lot of emotions there, usually for the addict as well. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Everybody ask us questions, use the Q&A feature or the chat feature, preferably the Q&A feature. Anything to do with relationships, addiction, recovery, between Kim and I, we can probably give you a really good answer. While we wait on some more questions here, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I wanted to go back to needs, and you did mention boundaries. What is the link between needs and boundaries versus wants and boundaries? And does it look a little different? And how does one turn a need into a boundary in a healthy way? And how does one turn a want into a boundary in a healthy way?
I love that question. Thank you for bringing that up. They're very intimately connected, because in order to set a boundary, an effective boundary, a useful boundary in the relationship, we have to know what we need. We have to know what's working, what's not working. And oftentimes when we're going to our partner to say, here's something that I need, or here's something that's happening, and here's what I need to happen instead. I think it works the same for needs and wants, other than needs are usually a little more serious. They're a little more, they have a little more gravity to them, because they're things that I have to have, remember, to be in the relationship or to feel safe inside the relationship. So I often say boundaries are really, they're not for control, they're for self-protection. They're for self-preservation, safety. And so I have to know what it is I'm protecting. I have to know myself a little bit in order to do that. So needs and wants are going to feel really confusing, or the ability to set, boundaries are going to feel really confusing without some understanding of what I need. So I have clients who will say to me, "You always ask me what I need. What does that mean?" And I remember feeling that way, like, I don't know, you're the therapist, tell me what I need, but needs are very personal. And like Scott said, for some relationships, maybe the use of pornography is not necessarily problematic for both people. But for some relationships it is, but we have to know that. We have to know what our values are, and where do we meet with those values, and how do I get those needs met inside of that relationship. I have to be able to know what they are and have to be able to communicate them, and especially if we are coming from different places, different moral bases, different family backgrounds, different, we come in different. But oftentimes relationships have some very baseline needs that have to be in place for most relationships. You've got to figure out what those are and what boundaries you need as a couple to protect those and make sure that they're happening. And if they're not happening now, that you're working towards that. In an addicted relationship, those get really wounded. My needs probably aren't for my partner to be having multiple affairs or going out drinking to blackout every night. That's probably not a need. So if I need to be working on communicating what those are and getting help in creating those boundaries within the relationship. I hope that helps answer that question.
Sorry, I think one of the real shortcomings in a lot of relationships, especially new relationships, is people don't discuss what their relationship needs are. They say, oh, well, we're going to have a monogamous relationship. Okay, well, we both have a need and a desire for monogamous relationship, but what do we mean by monogamous? Yes. People don't talk about it. I mean, most guys would say going to a strip club is not cheating. Most women would say going to a strip club is cheating. And I'm generalizing in a very big way there, but I mean, there's a lot of ground that needs to be talked about, and people don't discuss it.
Well, I think this is I think this is so important, right? We need to sit down and figure out the values that we're trying to put together. Addiction's one thing, values are necessary, could be something different. Like you said, what I might consider this, someone else might not, you might come from a home, one might come from a home where someone expresses their anger and they give you the silent treatment, where the other one could have a home where anger means violence and we're throwing things. So if I come from a home of silent treatment and I go to my partner who's being quiet and say, are you angry? And they look at me cross-eyed like, no, of course I'm not angry. I'm sitting here not saying anything. But their experience is anger is violence. Like, we better talk about that, because we're talking, we're not even in the same, we're not even having the same language, that was a personal one of mine that was kind of interesting. So when I would say, are you angry? That was just infuriating to the person who angry. They're not violent at all. They're just sitting there being quiet. And so we bring all these experiences, these values, these understandings. We need to talk about them. Again, it's another case for counseling. A counselor who can help you kind of sort through all that and filter through and figure out, what of those are the same and what are different. And we need to figure out what we can live with and what we can't.
Okay. Next question here. How should I, as the betrayed partner, respond when I feel during a conversation that the addict is being defensive with his response to my feelings and fears, or how I react to something he's feeling? So when the addict gets defensive, what's the betrayed partner's proper response, if there is such a thing as a proper response?
Yeah. I don't know that there's a right or wrong way to respond. I want to say that. I mean, obviously, it's going to be activating. It's going to activate fear, usually for the partner, anytime the addict gets defensive. It's very activating, because most partners will wonder, well, why would he or she be upset if they have nothing to hide, right? Like, why would that question even bother them? So the response, sometimes you might have to table that conversation. You might have to say, wow, you could ask them to reflect back what they thought they heard you say, because oftentimes filters goes off. Like, a betrayed partner might say, where were you today after work? I tried to call you and I couldn't get a hold of you. And what the addict hears is, I'm untrustworthy and a bad person because I didn't, and so that's might not be what was communicated, but our filters tend to do that. So sometimes you can ask them to reflect back. What did you hear me ask? Because you seem upset. Could you tell me back what you heard me say? I want to make sure you got the right message, in other words. You could also say, you seem super defensive right now. I just had a question for you. Would like an answer when you feel like you can answer that without being angry. So there's all sorts of ways to answer that. You could also just ignore the defensiveness and keep asking. If it's something that's important to you and that you want to know. It is painful though, because defensiveness it really tugs at that rug of trust, that rug under your feet of trust. And sometimes it's because the addict's defensive because they're still doing things they shouldn't be doing. Sometimes it's shame. High levels of even questioning me, even asking me a question brings up all those messages I was just saying. I'm bad. I'm an idiot. I'm this. I'm that. And that defensive comes up, and that's really how shame shows up. The me monster, shows up and kind of destroys that conversation. So I don't know if there's a right or wrong way, but there's lots of ways to skin the cat there. So if it feels like the reaction is way big and you need a timeout, great. If you feel like it's just a little defensiveness and you can address it, ask them to reflect back what it is you said. So you can clarify that. If they're far enough in recovery sort of and healing that you can do that. But I want to acknowledge that is painful. It absolutely can activate fear.
You can't control another person's reaction to a conversation, and I use the word reaction versus response differently. They're kind of different things for me. A reaction is that first instinct, I'm pissed that you would even ask me this question, and where a response is I can back away from that and say, I understand why you're struggling to trust me right now after all the things I did. My feelings are a little hurt because I didn't do this. But my first reaction is, I'm going to get defensive. And your first reaction to me getting defensive is, well, he's lying. I mean, this is human nature. So it's a tough situation. And I think with practice, couples can really get better at responding rather than reacting.
I will say too, if you guys some of you here listen to Matt, he is an EFT therapist, an emotionally focused therapist, and he would say, well, go below that. What's underneath that defensiveness? Let's talk about what's really going on here, right? I feel small when you ask me those questions, or I feel cornered, or I feel like I'm not enough, and that makes me feel sad. Instead of being sad, I just get mad. That's what they call getting out of content and into what's underneath. And it does take practice. So don't lose heart. It's hard for a long time, usually in this process. And as addicts start to love on themselves and figure out they have value and they have worth, then they can show up, they can bracket whatever that is and show up and answer questions and can validate your fears and your concerns, but that just takes time.
Yeah, and I'll validate what Kim just said. As an addict, I had to get out of my own shame before I could stop reacting and start acknowledging and responding. And it took me a while.
Maybe something that comes along like way before addiction, just FYI. Addiction comes along later, and feeds shame, but usually feeling shame-based or feeling less than, and some of those feelings, feeling unworthy of love and acceptance comes along first. We develop those feelings first, and addiction and all these things typically come later, and they're often a response to that shame.
That's why we turn to addiction. We're so ashamed of who we are, and we think we don't deserve love and affection and to get our needs met. Here we are back to needs. So instead of turning to other healthy people who might meet our needs, we turn to masturbation or pornography or alcohol or drugs or whatever. And we temporarily, we never meet those needs. those substances and behaviors don't meet those needs, but they temporarily distract us from those needs. So we don't have to feel the pain of unmet needs. That's what addiction is. If we could be more intimate with other people more easily, we wouldn't be addicts. You hear Rob and Johan Hari on his TED Talk called addiction and intimacy disorder, and that's what they're talking about. And the cure for addiction, if there is one, is connection. It's not sobriety, it's connection. When we feel truly connected and trusted and loved and trusting and loving, the need for our addiction really pretty much goes away. It never completely goes away. It always is the default response, but the need for it really diminishes greatly. I mean, am I on target or off base there?
100%. And I would say too that some of the earliest things that addicts will do in their own recovery process, and even partners will do in their healing process, is to identify their needs and figure out how to meet those better so that they can cope with the pressures of life. So an addict doesn't cope with life in healthy ways. They usually turn to alternative things to cope. So when they start to figure out, one of the assignments I always give is that daily balance thing, where they have to set goals in 5 areas that they do every day: spiritual, emotional, personal, relational. That's 4 areas, sorry: relational, personal, spiritual, and sexual. And when you start meeting those needs in healthy ways, you start to figure out, oh, I feel better. I feel better in balance. I don't need to reach out to something unhealthy to grab onto to cope, because I'm learning how to stand in that boat and balance with the turmoil that happens to be my life some days. So figuring out those personal needs are some of the very first things that most people are doing early on in their healing work.
Yeah, we do work with, at our Seeking Integrity Treatment Center in Los Angeles, where we work with addicts. We do work on needs, and I know that Kim, in your practice, I know you do work with your clients on needs, whether they're the addict or the partner, because I've seen your workbook. I know what you do, so it's really important. And one of those needs is the need for intimacy and connection. And that's the big one that's not met for the addict. I can't really speak for the betrayed partner because I am
right.
not
And
one. I'm the addict.
I think I misstated them. It's relational, personal, physical, and spiritual. So it's your body, it's your spirituality, it's your relationships, and it's your personal, like, hobbies, interests, that kind of thing. So think about those 4 areas in your life. How in balance are you? And I'm not just talking about the addict, I'm talking about anybody. Doesn't matter. I feel like I set these all the time. I'm considering too much work makes for not a balanced person. Too much church makes for not a balanced person. Too much gym time. I don't care if it's a healthy thing. It can be anything out of balance can create vulnerability for an addict, and it can create vulnerability for anyone for mental health issues. So I'm always trying to recalibrate and recounterbalance my weight in those areas, and making sure that, wow, I haven't talked to any friends in 2 weeks, so it doesn't matter how much spirituality I'm doing, I'm disconnected from others. So I have to rebalance. So remember, that's in order to, we have to start figuring out even very basic needs in order for long-term sobriety and health. We have to figure out what those are, both personally and relationally.
Okay. Can you point us to any books or websites offering guidance on categories of needs and wants to help kick off discussions with our spouse? Good question.
That is a trick question. Because it touched my old memory. Maybe Scott, you can help me with this a little while I'm sitting.
All you.
At the computer, but I was thinking anything on boundaries is going to talk about needs. So any book like the old Traditional Boundaries by Townsend and Cloud is a great book, because remember, you can't have boundaries unless you understand what your needs are, unless you understand what helps you and what you're protecting, right? So anything on boundaries would be good. I can't think of a book specifically on needs and wants, but I'll do some research. I can promise you that. And
Yeah, I'm gonna scroll down here. Let's see, books.
I'm trying to think of needs and I think it's a concept that just um, it's a concept that just has evolved through all of the work, but I think it comes out of all of the ideas and understanding about boundaries, both relational boundaries and individual boundaries. So it may be more implied than this is a needs and wants book, but it's all in there.
Yeah, I know I've got something listed on our website. I'm scrolling down here.
Scott's got the list.
It's here somewhere. Okay, well, I can't find it. We'll dig them up. We'll try and come up with this for next Friday. You're back next Friday, Kim, right?
I'm sorry I'll be here 2 weeks in a row because next week's my normal week, so I will be here.
Okay, so Kim will have a list for you next week, and I'm off the hook. Yay!
Yes.
Yeah, but boundaries books are always going to talk about, because the beginning of boundaries, as Kim stated right at the kind of early on, is knowing what our needs and our wants are. I mean,
Right. And we kind of have organically come up with lists. I know in the new workbook, the new book, there's going to be a list of personal needs, and a list of those spiritual needs, the physical needs, relational, the spiritual, the personal, and super important to know those. And those will automatically make sense as you start evaluating the relationship. I don't think I could have ever figured out relational needs unless I were to figure out personal needs first. It's like boundaries. I can't really set boundaries for others if I have no personal boundaries for myself. So figure out what your needs are, and then that will very easily start to translate as you start to meet those needs into what you need in the relationship.
Yeah. We got a link, and I think it only came to the panelists about a Forbes article with needs, so I'm going to pop that out there.
Fantastic, whoever did that.
Yes, there we go. So that's out there, so check that out. And we do have a sheet I know we have a sheet in our treatment manual about dependency needs. So maybe I'll try and dig that up, or post it on the website here in the next week or two.
I just know it's something that I've used in my couples therapy and individual therapy for years. I know even in my own personal therapy, I remember learning it. Yeah. So we need to do a little research there.
Yeah. Okay. As the addict who, we're on this question. As the addict who has inflicted pain in my relationship, I sometimes have fear over expressing my wants or needs because I somehow feel I don't deserve to have any because of what I have done, and that in turn can make me feel frustrated and resentful, which hurts my relationship. How do I tackle that to break the cycle? Interesting question, and not that uncommon. And as a matter of fact, not at all uncommon.
No, I agree. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I think this is a huge challenge for most people who are in recovery because they feel like the bad one, right, in the relationship. So who am I to set a boundary? Who am I to state a need, right? I should be needless and wantless. I'm the bad guy who made all the problems, or gal. And so I'm going to be, it's my job just to shut up and not say anything. And early on, there's going to be a lot of that, but over time, in order for you to fully heal from the addiction, you have to figure out your boundaries. This is how we got here. You have to figure out what your needs are. So, and it will be scary because if I have been acting out in an addiction and instead of meeting my needs in a healthy way, then kind of that muscle to be able to meet my own needs has not been strengthened for a very long time. And if I've got any sort of shame, I usually don't speak up for myself. I don't usually say, well, this isn't working for me right now, or a need I have inside the relationship is A, B, or C, because my shame will say, no, you can't do that. And oftentimes partners will really struggle with that too. Betrayed partners will be like, oh no, you did not. But I think over time, in order for that relationship to heal, both people need to have the ability to express their needs and wants and to set healthy boundaries around those to get those met, because we're not whole until we do. We don't come to the relationship whole. We come wounded. And I always say to the partners I work with, when you see your addict partner set a boundary with you, then you know they're getting better. You know they're having a sense of, and it doesn't have to be, hey, get off my toe. It doesn't have to be that. It just could be, I recognize that I can't have conversations about money and sex after 10 at night. So I need to have a boundary there, that because I need my sleep, or else I start saying things I shouldn't and I get defensive when I really don't need to be. So could we please table those discussions until I'm awake? That's an example of a boundary. Um, a partner may or may not like it, but it's so important that you're starting to learn those things, because that's how you're going to have long-term success in your recovery, is to be able to state those. And when we first start doing boundaries, they're kind of dramatic and, you're on my toe, get the hell off. People they get really reactionary. I think over time, as we learn how to do our boundaries, sometimes we don't even have to state them. They're just internal. We just know what we can and can't do. But to me, I recognize that when someone comes to me to set a boundary, they actually care enough about that relationship to risk it, to tell me, hey, I love you, but this isn't working for me, and can we do it another way? I don't, it's hard to hear when you're the receiver. I don't care who you are. No one is going to thank you for a boundary ever. So just remember that, if you remember nothing else from today. No one thanks us for those. Well, Kim, I'm
But they
surprised,
should, because it's really an expression of I want to be in a healthy relationship with you.
but it's hard to receive that. It's hard to be told what you're doing isn't right. I don't care if you're an addict or not, but it's the right thing to do. And so over time, you'll learn how to do that in a really loving way, in a not dramatic way. But it's important that even though you're uncomfortable or have fear about it, that you keep working on it. Work on that with your therapist. What are some areas I need to figure out what my needs are, and I need to express certain boundaries so I can be healthy? So you can show up in the relationship and in your own life in a healthy way, but want to totally validate the fear. It is really hard to do when you're in the doghouse, for sure. But part of getting out of that is figuring out how to be healthy. So
Yeah, there's a lot of shame with addicts too, and it's not only I'm afraid to express them. It is I feel like I don't deserve to have them because I've been such an awful person, or more accurately, I am such an awful person. And yeah, we have to work through that shame. Addicts also have trouble identifying their feelings. Can you talk a little bit about that, Kim, and how to work through that? Because I think that's related to needs and being able to set boundaries and
I
things.
think you're right. I think that's probably even backing up the train a little bit. That's probably even figuring out my feelings are probably even more first in order to not understanding my needs. Remember, if I started an addiction at any time in my life where I started to use addiction and replace dealing with uncomfortable feelings, then essentially that, I always call it like a muscle, like a bicep. If I didn't use my right arm for 15 years, what's going to happen to my right arm? That muscle atrophies. It's not very useful. So if I have, instead of feeling through my feelings, I have used compulsive or addictive behavior to cope, then I'm going to have I might, like by numbers, I might be 43 or 51 or 25 or whatever, but emotionally, there's a large part of me that stopped growing when I stopped feeling. So addicts don't know, oftentimes they're not good at expressing feelings because they don't even know what they are. They have not given themselves a chance to feel them from beginning to end. What addicts don't know are feelings have a shelf life. They will end, but it doesn't feel like it when we're in it. It feels like I'm going to die here. And that's why I take action. But unacted on feelings have a definite shelf life, unless it's clinical depression or something like that. It's a clinical issue. So when you stop medicating and taking away feelings, that muscle starts to work. All of a sudden I start to rework that muscle. My arm I start to get stronger. And it's not overnight. How many of you have gone to the gym like me after, I won't even say how long, and things just don't work quite right. It takes time and practice. So it takes time and practice. But if you go back to your behavior, your compulsive behavior, you essentially throw yourself right. I'm not giving myself permission to exercise and grow up the emotional part of me.
Yeah, and I brought that up because in the early stages of therapy for me, my therapist would say, "Well, what are you feeling right now?" And I don't know, angry. That's like, I had angry and high. That was it. There was no middle ground. And well, what's under the anger? Oh my God, And I had it looked like emojis before that we called them emojis, like little smiley faces, little round faces with and joyful, anxious, and I would have to look at the chart and go, this one, I'm feeling this one. And then, the question would be, okay, well, why are you feeling that? And we would get down to my wants and needs, it would take a whole hour, just to figure out what I was feeling and why, or maybe why, let alone what to do about it. So it really is a process. Because I just shut down all needs, wants, and feelings at about the age of 12 when I started, engaging in addictive behaviors. And my emotional growth just stopped there and kind of regressed, I think. It was a lot of work for me to undo that.
Well, and remember that some of those emotions, like anger, is really a secondary emotion. Yeah. There's usually more under that, but it's for me to discover. I actually think it's a really beautiful process. Many of you out there are probably going to hate me for saying that, but I really do think it's a beautiful process of if you have been absent from life and not feeling, it's going to be like taking off your glasses and you're and looking at the sun. It's not going to be easy. But you'll learn how to deal with those. You will learn how to sit with them. And that's what brings maturity. And that's what we have to deal with relationships in a healthy way. We've got to have the ability to be disappointed and lonely and tired and bored and stressed. We got to know how to do those things and have those feelings and feel them through in order to have that kind of adult maturity, emotional maturity to deal with relationships.
Okay, so we have 2 questions left. I'm going to ask them both at the same time, and I'm going to tell everybody we have to zap us right at 3:30 because there's another meeting starting right at 3:30 today. Do you recommend that a couple, a sex addict and a portrayed partner, get separate therapists for treatment, or is it okay to have the same one but work with that person separately? And then my brother insists that if only I forgive, then I will heal. Can you address that?
Okay. The first one, I absolutely think that there should be 2 separate therapists involved, and there should be a third therapist for the couples work when and if you're ready, because you don't know where that relationship's going, and the therapist is the advocate for that person. And I don't care how smart therapists and how magnificent they are, it is hard to hold that space for 2 people in the same relationship. So two different for sure. My brother insists if I only forgive, then I will heal. Forgiveness is a part of healing, and forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not the other person. Oftentimes this gets used and weaponized, I think, from a spiritual perspective. I think forgiveness is a part of a great big jigsaw puzzle. So no, I don't think that's the only element to healing. I think it's one of the important elements, and it's an element that's important for you. And that might mean you don't live with that person or you never even talk to them again, but forgiveness will be something you'll be ready for when you're ready. It's like grief. You can't tell someone when to forgive. You can't tell them how to grieve. So thank you for your feedback, brother, and I'll do my best. But walk your path. Thank you all for being here today. I will be back next week. I hope you'll join me and bring your questions. Thank you so much for interacting, and thank you, Scott.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Kim, for graciously switching weeks with Matt so that we could keep this going every week. And Tammy will be back with Kim next week, and I'll be back with Matt in 2 weeks. And those of you who get to like to see Matt's socks every 2 weeks, like I do, I'll make him show his socks. Has he told you I make him show off his socks every time he's on?
He worked with a neighbor. He wears his socks everywhere. So there you go.
So, Okay, everybody, thank you so much. And I'm sorry to cut us off like right at, but I got another one to do in a minute. So thank you, everybody.
Hey, everyone.